Hey, it's Lat, and in this video we're gonna talk about Laibach, a band which, in over its 40 years of existence, helped to define numerous genres, created many controversies, and even played a show in North Korea. Laibach's music has evolved over the years, of course, but generally they could be classified as industrial or martial music. But sometimes they are borrowing from other genres as well. Some could argue that they are not only a band but also a general art collective, fusing music with visual arts and performative arts, and I do agree with that standpoint. They're also very well known for their cover songs, but their covers always put a very unique spin on the reimagined song. Best example is probably their take on Queen's One Vision, retitled as Geburt einer Nation. The original light-hearted song about a longing for a fried chicken turns into a dark parody of fascism and a mockery of the myth of national rebirth. Laibach hail from Slovenia, but they've been around for so long that when they were founded in 1980, it was still called the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Their name itself comes from the German name for the Slovenian capital, Ljubljana. And even the name itself stirred up controversy and resulted in censorship from the Yugoslavian government. Something you can see with your own eyes is their aesthetic and visual appearance. If I had to explain the aesthetic, I'd say it's provocative, captivating, and always changing. Over the years, the band has exchanged many very controversial looks, such as the Nazi-esque uniforms, retro-futuristic themes, and pretty recently, the North Korean propaganda theme, just to name a few of the more controversial ones. Their aesthetic and the band itself is here to provoke ideas, emotions, and opinions, and in any way possible. Over the years, they've created many controversies, and they've been called many names: Stalinist, German nationalist, Slovenian nationalist, etc., etc. But really, at least how I see it, all of these labels are meaningless and the band transcends all of them. But sometimes I'm not sure on which layer of irony and parody the band is on. As I already mentioned, Laibach was founded in 1980 in a small mining town Trblovie in Slovenia, playing a few underground shows, titled for example Mikujeme budoucnost, We Are Forging the Future, or Touch of Evil. The band sadly lost its lead singer, Tomáš Hostník, who committed a protest suicide in 1982 by hanging himself from a kozolec, a wooden hayrack which is a Slovenian national symbol. The band found a new lead singer, Milan Fras, who has stayed with the band ever since. Nowadays, the only remaining founding member, not including Milan Fras, is Ivan Jani Novak, who is the main songwriter for the band, as well as being the general band leader. The early years of Laibach were without a doubt very turbulent, and in 1984 the band was forced to emigrate from Yugoslavia by the communist government, going to England, where aside from doing music they worked odd jobs in factories and on build sites. Their first two albums came out in 1985 and 1986, respectively called Laibach and Nova Akropola. Both of these albums are very experimental and they both contain songs that have been worked on since the band's inception. Sound-wise, the albums could be classified as noise music, but with a big focus on analog sounds, not digitally artificially created ones. A lot of the songs from the first two records were reworked in Laibach's most recent albums, simply called Revisited. Their third studio album, Opus Dei, is where they embraced more rhythmic songs as well as the already mentioned covers. On this album, we can find a militaristic rhythmic take on the popular song by Opus, Life is Life, as well as the previously mentioned Geburt einer Nation, originally One Vision by Queen. The song The Great Seal is a basis for the anthem of the unrecognized microstate NSK, Neue Slowenische Kunst, founded by the NSK Art Collective, of which Laibach are leading members. The NSK state has been described by Slavoj Žižek as an idea of a stateless state, also quoting the band leader Ivan Jani Novak describing NSK state. Basically, it's an ideal state and it doesn't exist. Aside from the militaristic/martial songs, the album also includes a novel take on industrial and noise music. Notably, songs like Transnational, Herzfelde and Jagerspiel are very much rhythmic and simple, yet the instruments and sounds used are highly unusual. For example, Herzfelde is mostly comprised of rhythmic shouting and recitation. Melody and pleasantness are thrown out of the window. Only thing we can feel are the raw emotions, hatred, unpleasantness, and authority. The appealing yet disgusting authority is a concept that Laibach utilizes very often. In 1988, Laibach released Let It Be, and the whole album is an adaptation of the famous 1970 Beatles album. This isn't the last time that Laibach will adapt the whole album from another artist. They followed with releasing Capital in 1992 and NATO in 1994. Both albums are much more rhythmic and electronic than their previous work. Capital is Laibach's criticism of consumerism and neoliberal globalism, and maybe slightly ironically, it very much continued in the international success of their previous work. The critique is omnipresent in the entire album, and it's visible even by the song titles. One song says it all. Wirtschaft ist tot. Economy is dead. Continuing on to NATO, all the songs featured are covers, yet all of them have been mostly adapted beyond recognition. The album deals with the dissolution of Yugoslavia and subsequent wars in Bosnia and Serbia. Cover songs present are, among others, Europe's Final Countdown, Dogs of War, originally by Pink Floyd, and Edwin Starr's War. Laibach's take on war is especially interesting, turning the popular anti-war song into a matter-of-fact answer to the question, war, what is it good for? GM, IBM, Newsweek, CNN, science, religion, and so on and so on. Quoting a 1994 MTV interview about the album, "Behind the catchy tunes, you'll find yourself entering the Laibach labyrinth of hidden meanings and hidden motivations." 2 years later, in 1996, another record was released, this time titled Jesus Christ Superstars. This album is a collection of songs about religion, mainly of course about Christianity and Judaism. Laibach's sound has also evolved, opting for a slightly heavier tone with a focus on distorted guitars. There are guitar riffs on most of the songs, and we can even hear a guitar solo in the song Declaration of Freedom. Aside from distorted guitars, we can also hear a frequent use of choral chanting alongside Milan Fras's strong vocals. There are both original songs as well as covers of pop music. Such cover is, for example, an adaptation of the main theme from the Jesus Christ Superstar musical, or cover of Prince's The Cross. The lyrics are sure to stir up controversy with some religious people. For example, in the song Abuse and Confession, the band is arguing that even from the Christian perspective, Judas had to betray Jesus in order to fulfill God's vision, and that ultimately Jesus has damned humanity. In the year 2003, the band has released their most popular album yet. VAT, an acronym for We Are Time, has an electronic, some could even say techno-esque sound with a very heavy focus on bass. Aesthetically, the band has once again revisited the Nazi-esque uniform theme. The single from this album, Tanz mit Laibach, is probably the first song most people have ever heard from Laibach, and that's for a good reason. It's a simple yet catchy track with extremely provocative lyrics and a music video that will catch everyone's attention. Some will be disgusted, but some will surely be intrigued after hearing the lyrics such as: Mit Totalitarismus und mit Demokratie, wir tanzen mit Faschismus und roter Anarchie. While a man, Milan Fras, dressed in a military uniform is walking seemingly straight towards you. Lyrically, the song is either a criticism of NATO's involvement in Iraq, or it is talking about the sentiment that Laibach can survive under any ideology, no matter how oppressive it is. Folk, released in 2006, is another album that is entirely comprised of cover songs. But this time, all the songs featured are Laibach adaptations of national anthems from countries all over the world. It is also the first album where the band was joined by the vocalist Mina Spiller. Some could argue that it is probably the most provocative, yet most interesting album the band has ever done. Mocking the British by adding lines such as "So you are still believing you're ruling the world" into their anthem, or combining the anthems of Israel and Palestine into one song. Sound-wise, the album is an evolution of their previous work with a change, that being that some parts are much more melodic. Best example of this would be in Italia, which is a cover of the Italian anthem, where the first verse is dominated by the melodic voice of Boris Benko, a singer of the Slovenian band Silence, who would go on to collaborate with Laibach on many future songs and even whole albums. Don't you worry though, after the first verse, Milan Fras steps up and taunts Italy for being the slave of the Roman Empire. Sadly, during this time, one of the founding members of the band, the keyboardist Dejan Kniaz, left the band. In 2008, the band released Laibach Kunst der Fuge, which is an interpretation of Johann Sebastian Bach, The Art of the Figure, an incomplete work by the classical composer. Most interestingly, Bach didn't specify by which instruments should the symphony be played. So, Laibach's electronic version is technically correct, even going by the original papers. In 2012, Laibach would go on to create a soundtrack for the Finnish film Iron Sky. This film was sadly pretty mediocre, both in the eyes of the public and the critics. In 2015, the band released yet another album with a very big change of their sound. Titled Spectre, the album was received very well by some fans and very badly by other fans. The criticism was coming mainly from the older fans who didn't appreciate Laibach's new, more melodic sound. When it comes to vocals, the already mentioned singer Minna Spiller is much more prominent, frequently exchanging vocal lines with Milan Fras and even leading the charge and being the main vocals on some songs such as Eat Liver. However, we can hear the vocal synergy of Milan Fras and Minna Spiller on songs such as No History, which we could consider as a de facto duet. This album also features some ballad-esque tracks, such as We Are Millions and Millions Are Like One. However, the darkness and ominousity of old Laibach isn't gone. Pretty clearly, we can hear it on song Eurovision with lyrics Europe is falling apart, while the music video shows the massive factories in Slovenia. If I may add a personal footnote, my favorite song of all time also released on this album, that being Resistance is Futile. The 7-minute track has many layers of complexity, and its performance with the RTV Slovenia Symphony Orchestra is truly a sight to behold. With lyrics like, we will raise the quality of life, for all of you. Existence as you know it is over. This track could be considered almost as an anthem of transhumanism, and I do plan on making a full song analysis in the future. Probably the most known song from this album is titled The Whistleblowers. A song which somehow blends the anthem-like glorious mood and the darkness of the uncanny volley. Shortly after releasing this album, the band would go on to play a show in North Korea. The performance of this song can be found on YouTube, so let's take a peek at it, cause it's really interesting.
We love, our mission is blessed. We fight for you, for freedom unforeseen, thinking as one.
A documentary movie called Liberation Day released about the whole North Korean affair, as well as an EP and a full album which we're gonna talk about later. Before we talk about that, we must mention the 2017 album Also sprach Zarathustra. Originally a soundtrack for the theatrical play directed by Matthias Berger, based upon the book by Friedrich Nietzsche Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The album is very dark and slow and overall very experimental, with some glimpses of light and melody. This glimpse of light and melody mainly being the ballad Vorsen en Afgang. A counterpart to this song could be Ein Verkündiger, where Milan Fras's vocals sound like a callback to the times of Opus Dei. Now, onto the already mentioned album and EP connected to their North Korean concerts. The EP is titled Party Songs and it contains 3 songs that are popular in North Korea, of course within Laibach adaptation. Most notably, it contains the cover of the song We Will Go to Mount Pictou. Minna Spiller even decided to sing a part of the song in Korean, but was prohibited from doing so by the North Korean censors. The album, which ultimately released in 2018, is a cover of the 1965 musical Sound of Music, which is very popular in North Korea. In Laibach's adaptations decided to give it a very uncanny vibe, trying to point out Nazi and pedophilic themes in the original musical, North Korean society, and maybe even our society. There are also some allegories between Nazism and the North Korean Juche regime. Before recording this album in the studio, Minna Spiller departed from the band due to having a child. The absence of her vocals is very much compensated by the returning Boris Benko and a new female vocalist, Marina Martensen. Musically, it's another evolution of Laibach, being much more melodic than Spectre and being 10 times more uncanny. We can also hear the frequent use of child choirs, which adds to the uncanny atmosphere. One thing is certain, it was certainly a shock when old fans of the band heard Milan Fras saying that his favorite things are pink-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels. The latest album Laibach released up to this point is called Revisited. The album contains songs and concepts from their first 2 albums that are, as the title suggests, revisited. It has to be said though that most of the songs were recorded a few years before their release in 2020. Sound-wise, we can hear a weird mix of Spectre and their first two albums. If I had to pinpoint the best song from this album, it would be without a doubt Tiki Zivaš, Slovenian for You Who Are Challenging. Now, starting to listening to Laibach can be incredibly hard because, of course, they are quite a niche band. But given the fact that you watched so far into this video, you must have some interest already. And if you already are a fan of Laibach, feel free to skip this section or stay for some more album recommendations. And if you are a fan, please tell me what are your favorite songs and albums from Laibach in the comments below. Thanks! So to start, it really depends if you enjoy listening to whole albums or just single songs organized in a playlist. If you do prefer playlists, I've created some Spotify playlists that are linked in the description. To quickly go over them, I've created Laibach Essentials, which contains the most known songs from all eras of the band. Starting from the newest to the oldest, with a slight exception, the playlist starts with the booming track Tanz mit Laibach. I've also made playlists for fans of industrial metal music, noise music and electronic music. Lastly, there's a playlist of Laibach ballads, or at least songs that are close to a ballad for those who enjoy softer music. But I do recommend listening to whole albums instead of just playlists. Without a doubt, the easiest album that you can start listening to is Spectre, and it was criticized for that by some older fans. Yet in my opinion, it's still a great record, one that strikes the balance between innovation and listeners' enjoyability. So if you don't mind electronic music and you want a mix of heaviness and softness, do start with Spectre. Another starter album could be Folk, because you're highly likely to be familiar with all the national anthems used. Just don't be offended if they are mocking your nation or praising the nation that you consider your enemy. Sound-wise, Folk is similar to Spectre with more experimental parts. Grand and electronic would be the words to describe the sound. If you enjoy more common industrial metal music, Jesus Christ Superstars is the album for you. While very much still sounding like Laibach, fans of Rammstein or Die Krupps will without a doubt enjoy this album. For fans of heavier and maybe purer music, there are two perfect albums. NATO for those who enjoy more of an electronic sound, and Opus Dei for those who enjoy the rawness of industrial music. Both of these are great picks, but I must admit that Opus Dei has higher highs and lower lows. To be perfectly clear, there aren't bad Laibach albums, but some of them are not for everyone. But I'm sure you're gonna pick what you enjoy, and you're probably gonna like what you hear. Well, this is a hard question to portray accurately, and without a doubt, a lot of my personal biases already seeped through the script in the earlier parts. Yet to put it bluntly, Laibach is one of my favorite bands, but for me, they go further, above the status of a band. So I might enjoy, for example, Metallica's music a bit more, but due to the visual presentation, theatrical artistry, and connections to various ideologies, politics and history, Laibach are much more to me, at least if we look at the bigger picture. As is apparent from the videos on this channel, history, music and politics are topics that I found extremely fascinating, so my fascination with Laibach is pretty self-explanatory. Also, I need to mention the authoritarian aesthetic that they sometimes show, mainly to provoke, which is also one of the main reasons I got interested in the band. In my early teen years, I was, as many others in that age are, very angsty. And what's the nerd equivalent of being an emo? Picking a crazy ideology and running with it. For me, it was having a boner for eugenics, Nietzsche and transhumanism. And as I have grown, both mentally and with my political ideals, my interpretation of Laibach has grown with me. Even though I don't always agree with what they are saying and sometimes I do not understand it, I'm alright with it. Because for me, Laibach transcends ideology, and that also shows the scary appeal of authority that caused horrendous crimes against humanity over the years, such as the Holodomor, the Holocaust, or the Great Leap Forward. However, if I stop fanboying, there are still albums I couldn't get into, such as their first two albums, the album Let It Be or Sound of Music. Are they bad albums? No, not necessarily, they still have their fanbase. But they're either too experimental in the case of Laibach's first two albums, or too uncanny and sometimes weird, and that's in the case of Sounds of Music. But this criticism could be said about most of Laibach's music, yet I praise it so highly, so I don't quite know what to say about it in conclusion. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been long, extremely hard to do, but I do hope it was worth it and that you have enjoyed it. Please make sure to let me know your opinion about the band in the comments. And also sharing the video helps me a lot, because the YouTube algorithm doesn't particularly enjoy obscure Slovenian music and small niche channels. Until next time, bye.